Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Flight 002 to Africa. Flight time will be 10 hours and 45 minutes, cruising at an altitude of 40,000 feet. For your listening pleasure, there are 12 channels, so with your relaxation, enjoy some cool vibration.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys, girls, brothers, sisters, friends, and enemies, thank y'all for tuning in to this broadcast. We are here to honor the great Sam Ford for his illustrious career of 50 years of broadcasting. I'm Kimon Freeman, representing the radical side of Maliki Avenue of WEAC Radio, and I'm joined by the iconic photographer, DC's legend, living legend, Roy Lewis Jr. Roy, you want to say something?
Go ahead with Sam.
Go ahead with Sam. All right. So whenever Roy feels like he wants to chime in, Sam, he's gonna jump in here. So he's the third wheel for this date. But Sam, we just giving you flowers, brother. But the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, I just going to say, Roy, I did a piece on Roy a couple of years ago, might have been 3 years ago. I think it was right before COVID hit. But in any event, Roy has been doing this since he was about 17 years old. It's amazing, and I'm not sure exactly how old Roy is now. I know he's at least 85, but he may be older than that.
He's a spring chicken.
Well, he certainly gets around like it, because you go to these events and Roy's up, down, he's on his knees, he's on his hands, he's squatting. He has not let, let's say, time slow him down. He's still a photographer who gets his pictures taken. And one thing, Roy, you said to me when I did this picture, this story on you, you noticed how Mayor Bowser shot selfies. Well, guess who shot a selfie with me last night? Mayor Bowser. And I told her, I said, Roy told me you were doing selfies.
You got that selfie from the mayor of DC because you was being presented a proclamation because December 13th is now declared Sam Ford Day in Washington, D.C.
Well, that's right. That was right. That was quite an honor. In fact, the group Hacks and Flacks, which Hack stands for, of course, journalists. Flax stands for public relations people. But, of course, it was more than just public relations people. It was a number of, government officials. And I guess Mark Seagraves and Tom Sherwood and Kootenai Dill, they seem to be the ones that put this thing on, and it was very nice. There was a lot of folks, and, what happens was, I was in the 6 o'clock news last night because of this, issue of the city possibly losing the Caps and the Wizards to Virginia. So, anyway.
That is completely ridiculous. There'd be no D.C. team inside D.C. proper. That is ridiculous.
Well, the Nats and D.C. United will still be here, but nevertheless, you're right. They probably want to keep those teams here as well. But anyway, so after that, I've got a little 12.8-pound dog named Miko who's been with me for about 13 years, and so she's good all day. She has to go. And so I left. My work came home first for Miko, and then I'm giving her a walk and bringing her back in, and my daughter calls me sort of frantic saying, "Where are you? The mayor's waiting." And I was like, "Oh, okay, well, let me get uptown." So I drove on up there. And it took me about 20 minutes to get there. But again, it was a wonderful crowd, a wonderful feeling. And, it's a very nice thing to do that. And I really appreciated it.
And you have one more event to go. I'm going to join you there. It's going to be happening Friday, December the 15th. Where are you going to be at? Don't worry. By the time this airs, the event would already happen, so you ain't got to worry about too many people coming.
Okay, well, it's the Continental Pool Lounge, which is at Lee Highway and Fort Myers Drive, and it's kind of the traditional place that Channel 7 people, when they leave Channel 7, it's tradition that they have a little party for them there, and so that's the party that we're going to have, after my last appearance as a salaried reporter at Channel 7.
Well, let me tell you this, Sam. Unlike Ted Leonis. I hate Virginia, and if it wasn't for Fairfax County Police, there's no reason why I would be drugged into Virginia other than coming to toast you for your celebration.
Well, you know, they joke with me at Channel 7 because, you know, Channel 7 is in Roslyn, and they always say, well, you know, Sam's crossed the river. And they say, do you have your passport? Because basically, I do nothing in Virginia. The funny thing was, originally, you know, when we moved there 20 years ago from Northwest Washington, I had a desk over there, but then they decided they wanted to put me back over on this side of the river. So they gave me an office at the Washington Gas Building, which is right across the street from the Capitol. I've been there for 20 years, you know. So really, I very seldom go to Virginia myself, even though I work for, you know, for a station that is based in Virginia. But, you know, that is the place where, you know, you tend to have the parties. It's walkable from the station. So that's the main reason, I think. It's a pool hall, and, you know, everybody comes in there. It's a nice little place, and we all have our little parties, and then we leave.
Yeah. Now, Sam, you've been a journalist for, you know, what, three decades, better 3 decades. Was it 36 years you've been at your current position?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I've been a journalist really for about 51 years. In like 1972. I was at KSJ or KANU Radio, which is the University of Kansas radio station, which is not a small station. It's a 110,000 watt FM station. And I was the newsreader in the morning. I would write and read the news in the morning. And then on weekends, I was a disc jockey at WREN Topeka Radio. And so I did, you know, that sort of thing. And then I went to grad school at the University of Minnesota, and because of the public radio connection, I went to KSJN in St. Paul, and they gave me a job. I was a newsreader and writer there, and then I also covered events, you know, nighttime speeches and things like that for the radio station. And then sometimes, basically what would happen is I would miss the last bus back to Minneapolis where I lived. So I'd have to sleep on a table at the radio station until the buses ran again in the morning. And then I would
talk about paying the dues.
Oh yeah, well I enjoyed it. You know, the funny thing about it is when I was that age, I loved it. To the point that I felt seriously that I ought to be paying these people to let me work there because I was having such a good time, you know. I don't think that way anymore. But when I was about, 21, 22, I was just a happy camper, you know, and that's sort of how it was. And I got hired, actually, for a traineeship with CBS News at the television station, WCCO, because I was sort of an intern there. And really, one of the things they wanted me to do was kind of interesting, was to do a documentary on American Indians, a tribe called the Menominee tribe over in Wisconsin, which is, you know, next to Minnesota. So they asked me to do it, and I said, you know, sure. They said, you know, find a cameraman and go over there and do the story. So I found the cameraman. We went over there and we, you know, interviewed the Indians. We showed they had a kind of a not a woodworking shop, a lumber industry, basically a lumber plant. And we showed them doing that in the trees, and we interviewed folks, and we brought it back to Minneapolis. I wrote it up. The editor edited it, and I hired a real, you know, American Indian to narrate it. And we took it to the folks, and there was basically a Republicans women's club. I don't really know why, but anyway, that's who they wanted me to do, who wanted this done, so we did it. And they were at 3M, which is a big company in Minnesota. They watched the documentary, they applauded, they said thank you. And the next day, Mr. Van, who was the head of our TV station, called me in and said, how would you like to go to Washington tomorrow? And I was like, yeah, sure. You know, I mean, what were you think a young guy would say? So they put me on a plane first class, all right, and I flew to Washington to cover the third conference of black elected officials. And I got to see all these black people that I'd seen on television. You know, I'm in the Midwest. We don't see these people every day. So I saw Coretta King. I saw Jesse Jackson. I saw Charles Rangel. I saw Carl T. Rowan. You know, and I had my little, Minolta 35 millimeter, and I was snapping pictures of all these folks. And something else happened at that meeting. There were a lot of black reporters, and so they decided to form something called the National Association of Black Journalists. And so I was there, and I became one of the 44 founders, even though I had no real business there. I was just there.
You crashed the party. First class ticket, no doubt.
So my wife, my late wife, she called me Forrest Gump. You know, the guy just happens to be
oh, wow.
somewhere.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, life is a box of chocolates.
Well, I don't know about all that, but it hadn't been all chocolates, let me say, through the years. But still, it was a time, and, you know, I used to spend my summers out here, even though I'm from Kansas. I used to spend my summers out here because my sister lived in Falls Church, and they worked out here. So I was familiar with the on-air people here in Washington, like, for example, Max Robinson and Jim Vance. And so when we got to the NABJ, I was starstruck. Here was Max sitting on the couch. You know what I'm saying? And so they had an election, and Max was, you know, running for president of the NABJ along with a guy named now that's the senior moment here. His name is going to come, Chuck Stone. Chuck Stone. And so, of course, I was with the TV people, and Chuck Stone it was one of the newspaper people. And really, when you get down to it, NABJ was formed by, for the most part, the television people from Washington and the newspaper people from Philadelphia. And there were more newspaper people at that conference, and Chuck Stone won. Max lost. But of course, you know, after that, it was no, you know, problem. I mean, okay, Chuck won, so now we're all behind Chuck. That's sort of how it was. And it was a wonderful experience. And, you know, I got to digress because I recently saw a picture of Chuck, and it was so interesting. But Chuck Stone was at some event there at about 1961. And in this picture, you see Chuck Stone turning and smiling. Next to Chuck Stone was Malcolm X. Behind Chuck Stone was Adam Clayton Powell. And behind Malcolm X was Kwame Nkrumah, who was then the president of Ghana. And you know, Chuck had arranged to get these people together. So it's one of those, you know, sort of great things. We had some really great people that created this organization, the National Association of Black Journalists.
And before the story of Forrest Gump got started, how did you end up on that 110,000 watt station in Kansas? And before you answer that, let me just say condolences for the loss of your beautiful wife. How many years were y'all together in Holy Matrimony?
We were together for 40 years. We were together for 40 years.
The loss of your beautiful wife for 40 years, and also, you know, the only other hero I can think of, and you are a hero of mine. You're a black superhero on the local scene for me. The only other hero I have in Kansas is the great Gordon Parks, and I'm sitting here with my Martin local version of Gordon Parks, great Roy Lewis, who I'm trying to get to chime into this interview. So Roy, one more time. You're doing a very bad job as a co-host in this interview. Is there anything you want to chime in for your years of story?
That story of Chuck Stone and in the beginning of NABJ, right?
Yes.
So I might have been at that beginning meeting. You know what I'm saying? I was thinking when I'm listening to you think about the parallel between our story, his story, my story, and Johnson Publishing Company. And Mr. Johnson hired me just out of Mississippi, just out of high school, and him being hired, how he worked into journalism. Those are parallel stories that so many people don't get a chance to tell. We know the same people: Larry Neal, Larry Steele, and all these people that were with Johnson and Jet And all these newspaper people that was at the beginning of NABJ and the Association of Black Journalists and all that, it was all interactive. Chuck Stone was a major person in there, who was never really got his due, but he was the man behind the scene on so many things, dealing with journalism, television, radio, newspapers, White House, power. Chuck Stone dealt with real power.
I had immense respect for him. You're absolutely right, Roy. Chuck Stone was a great.
And there were a couple others that come through the White House that nobody ever. It's almost like the new film that's just been done about the March on Washington guy.
Bayard Rustin, you mean?
There you go. Bayard Rustin, Chuck Stone, they're all in the same kind of category. They're in the same kind of category, and in fact, I'm hearing you talk about it like that, and I'm sitting here listening and learning because, like I said, our lives travel down the same kind of road, and, you know, I've had such great respect for you and your work, and really sorry to see you get not off the air where you ain't going to fade into. You are not going to fade into the black. I know that. But you know that there's something else waiting in the wings. I just know that much about you and who you are. But I'm glad to see you get off that beaten path, you know, going back across the river and all of that.
Well, let's take it from there, Sam. How did you get started initially with your humble beginnings? Not so humble, it's 110,000 watt station.
You brought up Gordon Parks. I got to tell you my Gordon Parks story.
Let's go.
Because I'm from a town called Independence, Kansas. And Gordon Parks is from a town called Fort Scott, Kansas, and they're in the same section of the state, southeast Kansas. And Gordon Parks, one thing, if you all are in that area, you ought to stop by. There is now a Gordon Parks Museum in Fort Scott, Kansas. And these are little towns. I mean, you're talking about, you know, if you put Independence and Fort Scott, you wouldn't even fill up a half of a Commander's stadium. And they got about, I think Fort Scott and Independence have about, you know, 8 or 10,000 people in them. They're not very many, and a lot fewer people than they used to have, you know. But anyway, I've got to go see that Gordon Parks Museum. But one of the things that was just great as a kid growing up in Independence was that Gordon Parks did a movie on Kansas called The Learning Tree. I don't know if y'all have seen it. But anyway, The Learning Tree. And so I was a kid in high school at the time. So when this came out, I mean, we were like, oh, my God, this was great. And I think it had some kind of sex scene in it or something. And they had these nuns on the censorship board in Independence. But they let it go in because it was from Kansas. But anyway, we watched this movie. We loved it. We related to it because it was about a kid growing up in Kansas. Maybe 30 years earlier, but still a kid growing up in Kansas. And so, you know, Gordon Parks had this thing. And then he came here to Washington to the Corcoran for a show. And I got to talk to him and tell him about this film and to, you know, do a piece on him. And I think I got just about everything he's done. You know, I collected it here and there, and you know, but he is definitely one of my heroes. He was a Renaissance man. He did things that you know, people don't do, and he did a lot of different things, from making movies to playing music to you name it. Gordon Parks was very talented.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, a younger generation than us, Gordon Parks was also the director of Shaft, was a groundbreaking film, rest in peace to Richard Roundtree, who we lost this year. And his son, Gordon Parks Jr., brought us the film Superfly that Gordon Parks, the senior, helped fund. So those are some names that in pop culture that probably would appreciate his contributions beyond.
And if you look back into the 40s, some of the great photography that happened here in Washington, some of the great stuff, the woman with the mop, you know what I mean? Just different stories he moved around this city and told, and they're very famous photographs to this day.
WPA, the WPA, he was one of the WPA photographers.
Okay.
He left Minneapolis and went to Chicago, worked at the Southside Community Arts Center. 20 years later, 30 years later, I came through the other head exhibits at Southside Community Arts Center. So that, in that way, he came through Chicago. I went to Chicago from Mississippi. He went to Chicago from Minneapolis. And so, crossing paths.
But I'm gonna correct you, Roy. He's from St. Paul. They're the Twin Cities, but all the Gordon stuff was in St. Paul, not Minneapolis.
I'm sorry. St. Paul. Really? St. Paul? I thought it was Minneapolis. Okay.
I lived in the Twin Cities, so they're two towns, but Gordon's his central location, everything was St. Paul, not Minneapolis.
All I know is that he had his first major exhibit at Dayton since Minneapolis.
Okay.
Dayton department store, because I had one there.
Okay, yeah, well that's a store. Of course, that store is everywhere. It's like Macy's. You know what I mean? They got, at least that day they had branches everywhere. Yeah,
it's everywhere. So anyway, man, it's just think about what's happening right now. Here we are talking to each other, and this brother's got WEAC Radio, who really gives his time to people who don't get no time on the airways. And here we are, people are listening to you about your life, and then now we got my life and your life. You've done me before on radio.
Yeah, and one of the things, Roy, as I said, I want the NABJ to give you an award because you are probably one of the longest lasting journalists. You are in your 80s and you're still out here working every day. And I think that deserves recognition, and I got to make sure they give you an award. Okay? It's going to happen.
Let's make that happen. Thank you, Sam. Let's make that happen because we're here to give you your flowers, and we're here to give Brother Roy Lewis Jr. his flowers as well. Now, Sam, and you kept making the point about St. Paul being across the river. You've been crossing rivers your whole life, it sounds like. So when you got started, how did you get your first gig at that 110,000 watt station? How do you get started, and what do you plan to do now?
Well, one of the things is, when kids play basketball, do they wait till they get to high school to start playing basketball? No. They've been playing basketball for a while. Well, the same thing with journalism. When I got to be about 16, I managed to buy me a tape recorder. And so I was home playing television reporter years before I was a television reporter. So by the time I got to the University of Kansas at about 18, then I'd already been doing it, at home. So when it came to time to audition, heck, I could do that stuff, right? So that's it. I mean, as I said, I loved it and I could do it. And one of the things that we did, in fact, a good friend of mine just died out in Seattle, Washington. His name was Vernon Nichols. And Vernon and I met in these broadcasting classes, and we decided we were going to do a story. Going to do a show. And so we were looking for a name for the show, and this girl from Iowa came up with a good name for us. And she said, well, at that time they were talking about happiness is. We called our show Blackness Is. And at that point, what we did, we did stories on black people in various aspects. We played a lot of music that, whatever we wanted to play. It might be Pig Meat Markham. It wasn't any kind of, hip hop. The current music of the day necessarily. It was whatever we wanted to play. And we'd get on there and we'd play. And we were on the University of Kansas station, I would guess, for 4 hours. We were on there for a long time. And so, we had quite an audience. Kansas is right, University of Kansas is right near Leavenworth, Fort Leavenworth in Alaska. So the prisons, we were very popular in the prison community in Kansas. And but we just had a good time doing these things. And various ones of us took turns. Sometime I did the show, sometime Vernon did the show, sometime a guy named Thurk did the show. But it was a regular feature of the radio station. I understand for years after I left, because I called back and they were still doing the show. They're not doing it now, but anyway, that was a lot of fun. So, I always tell people, whatever you want to really do, start playing it. Because basketball, kids learn basketball. They start playing basketball young, and then they can play when they get older. I started doing television young, and then I could do it when I got older.
Well, I really appreciate that, and I co-sign on it because I got my first start following in the footsteps on PFW, and I would read the announcement, the event announcement, and that was the first person, brother. What's my brother's name? You used to have a senior moment, and this is a junior senior moment. His name come to me, Lou Hankins.
Askia was a big man over there.
Well, Lou Hankins is the first person to tell me that I had a good voice and I could write, and he encouraged me.
Okay.
Askia actually asked me to help him with news tips, so I would send him stuff that he should know about. So I got a lot of training before I jumped out there. So I really appreciate you making that clear that we need to start where we are. Don't wait for someone to validate you. Don't wait for someone to acknowledge you. Start where you are. And that would set off a chain of unforeseen circumstances that would lead you down a path to get you to where you want to go. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Now, that's how you got started. Now, what do you plan to do now?
Well, people ask me that, and I don't know. I mean, my last day is Friday, December 15th, right? So Saturday, December 16th. It's just going to, because I'm always off Saturdays. I don't know. You know, it's just like, this has been my routine at Channel 7 for 36 years and 7 months. Okay? So I'm used to it. And, of course, that's the thing about older people. You know, they don't like change in the routine. So I don't know what'll happen. I've been doing it. But, let me say but. I want to do something still in media. I like the fact that we have YouTube and those things. And fortunately, I work long enough. I've been paying into a pension fund for 45 years, so I don't have to work at something else. I can do pretty good with my Social Security and my pension, at least unless the inflation goes really crazy. But so I'm thinking about something that would involve media. And one thing that's sort of in my head, one of the things that's really interesting is, you know, a few months ago, Good Morning America did a segment out of Accra, Ghana, live with Robin Roberts. And in this show, she said that in the last 3 years, 5,000 African Americans had moved to Ghana. And I thought, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, the largest population of, what do you call it, expatriates? What do you call it?
Expats.
Joint. The largest number of expats in Africa from America is in Ghana.
So I had thought about maybe going. I went over there last year just to vacation, for a week, and I loved it. Okay, and I didn't see any Americans because I really didn't go over there to see Americans. But the interesting thing was, while I was there were so many Americans hitting me up saying, "Oh, I just left Ghana. Oh, I'm here." And one guy said, "Are you staying at the Embassy Gardens?" And I said, "Yes." He says, "So am I." So I mean, literally, when I put up pictures and things, and there's a guy named. I don't know. Let me forget the name. But anyway, there's a guy that I met. He said he was over there. He said, "Let's get together for coffee when we get back to Washington." And actually, we did. And he takes groups to Ghana. He said, I think twice a year. So that's kind of interesting. So I thought about, maybe something like that, where you would tell the stories of the people who are in Ghana to the people that may want to come, because there may be a movement of people who want to go back to someplace in Africa. And one of my wonderful stories that I enjoyed doing here in Washington was back when Rawlings was the president of Ghana, the late Jerry Rawlings, and Bill Clinton was the president here in the United States, and they had a joint news conference at the White House. And I said, I got to go down there. And I was trying. So I convinced Channel 7 that this was a good story and I needed to do it. And then I went to the White House, and I don't know if you all have been to the White House, but there's a real pecking order, right? They got these seats here, and the New York Times gets asked a question, and CBS News and NBC. And, of course, you coming from WJLA in Washington, no, they're not going to give you any, you're not going to get a question in, right? But I used my blackness, and guess where I sat? I didn't sit on the American side. I sat on the African side, where the Ghanaians. Now, the Ghanaians didn't really have much of a press corps. They were mainly aides of President Rawlings, but I sat in their midst of, right? And then they says, okay, here's time for the American press corps to ask a question. Okay, now for the Ghanaian press corps to ask a question. And I jumped up and I said, oh, I guess I'm on the wrong side. But I have a question for the president of Ghana, Mr. Rawlings. And I said, so I've heard that you are offering dual citizenship to African Americans. Is that true? And he said, it is absolutely true. You are our kith and kin. Anyway, it was an uproarious thing there. Some of the American reporters questioned, whether you would have dual loyalty and all that. Anyway, so but the thing is, Clinton had something to say, and Rawlings said, "No, this is my question," and he grabbed Clinton by the hand to stop him from talking. Right? Oh. And the funny thing, our photographers, we had a photographer, the late Steve Athens. He was one of the shooters there at the news conference, and he said afterward he came up to me and said, "Run," and said, "Sam, I've never seen it before. You had them holding hands. I've never seen it before." And he dubbed the video off of my questions, and he gave it to me. And he said, "You got to keep this," and I still have it.
I'm glad to hear that. I love these stories. So, this is WEAC Radio, and we always want to make sure we get the stories out there. So before we get out of here, I wanted to ask you, you had your longtime companion at work, your partner in crime, Miss Peggy. She retired, preceded you in retirement. I remember watching something, a tribute to her, and she was saying that she covered everything from the White House to the crack house. And some people can make the argument it's the same house, but nevertheless.
Yeah, right. They did find some cocaine there, didn't they?
Yeah, I remember when George Bush pulled out the crack in the Oval Office.
Oh, I remember that. They bought it. Supposedly, they bought it in Lafayette Park and had to direct the guy how to get to Lafayette Park because he'd never heard of it before.
Exactly. They ordered some crack. They was getting delivery before the weed delivery guys was sending them.
Yep.
How would you summarize your career over this period of time, and what stories stick out to your mind? And Brother Roy, I want you to think about what story sticks out in your mind in your interactions with Brother Sam. So I want y'all to think about what story sticks out in your mind as you look back that you think would be an opportune time to share.
Well, one of the stories, you mentioned Peggy Gilgannon, and she is, she's the one organizing this party, by the way, and we're still very good friends. We're still very good friends, and, one thing that, you really know who your friends are in a time of crisis, if you will. And I remember, when my wife died, it was in Kansas, and two of my friends just dropped everything to come out there and just say, we're here to do anything we can. One of them was Peggy, and another one was an African friend of mine named Pamphile. I think Pamphile was in Italy, and he just dropped everything, and he came to Kansas. And Peggy, she dropped everything, and she came to Kansas. And she was saying, what can I do? And I handed her the keys to the car, because she always drove me around D.C. So she drove us around Kansas, and so it was just one of those things. But one of the stories that Peggy and I did was, I did a story on DNA, trying to find out where did we come from? Where do I come from? Because, if you're an African American because of slavery, the only thing you know is that you came from somewhere on the vast continent of Africa. And so doing the DNA testing, we did this story, I think, originally the testing in 1999. But anyway, they found DNA matches to my male DNA in Nigeria. And so I thought, okay, this is a good opportunity to go to Nigeria. And so Peggy was my photographer in Nigeria. And it was so funny. One day I went, I was going somewhere, and Peggy wasn't with me. And they said, where's our Oyingbo? And I said, what's an Oyingbo? Oyingbo is white person. Okay, so I said, Peggy is, now we know a word in Yoruba. Oyingbo means white person. But anyway, so...
We did that for the party tomorrow.
Okay. And so we did that story. So that was one of the stories that I really, enjoyed. And I don't know if we won awards for it, but, if we didn't, who cares? I mean, it was a wonderful series that we did. And the other thing that I would note was a time that really hit me was the night that Obama won the presidential election. Peggy and I were positioned at 14th and U. And you won't believe this, because I've got friends in Nigeria. You know how I found out that Obama had really won? A Nigerian called me from Lagos. Or no, Benin City. He called me from Benin City and says, yes, the news is that he's won. And I'm like, here in the United States. I said, really? Really? They said, he had the news first. I got a call from Nigeria telling me Obama had won. Well, and sure enough, he had won. That night, as we stood at 14th and U, which you may recall was where Martin Luther King's headquarters were here in Washington in 1968, and that was the spot at which the riots began when they found out he had died. And it spread from there. Well, there was a crowd there, and people were dancing and singing, and one of the things that I went live, and I said, it's amazing. 40 years ago, this was where the riot started, and 40 years later, this is where I'm finding out that we have elected the first black president of the United States, and there was a happy crowd here, and it was just pandemonium in the street. The police weren't there. I don't think they thought that anything would happen like this, right? Because other elections, they just happened. Anyway, a good friend of mine is a D.C. cop. His name is Vernon Gudger. He was walking by. I looked in the middle of the street. He's in the middle of 14th and U directing traffic. He just stopped out of uniform. I ran out in the street and we just embraced, because this was such a happy moment. And if we went down, let me tell you, when this town, a lot of young people have not seen Washington win a Super Bowl before, right? But when Washington was winning Super Bowls, this town would explode, right? I mean, and this Obama election was bigger than that. It was the biggest celebration I have ever seen in Washington, and it was spontaneous, and it was wonderful. And I kept saying, I'm so happy I'm alive. I'm so happy I'm alive to see this. And it was a wonderful night.
Yeah, it definitely was a symbolic win for all of us, and it was so beautiful to see so many black people and everyone actually of goodwill celebrating out there. I remember that night well. Brother Roy, you got a story you wanted to share out of his illustrious career?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Million Man March that day, which I never really thought I would ever see. That many men and women, just at one place, one time, celebrating that day. And for you, brother, you were out there working. I mean, everybody was working like the end of the world was coming. I'm serious. I'm to all the technicians, and to have that happen, that many people together for a whole day, for me, that was something that all our ancestors, all the things that went to making that happen, to actually work on that in all kinds of ways. I mean, not just the people who worked on it, the Muslims or whatever, but our whole African community working on our coming together to deal with some of the issues that dealt with men, and being in one place at one time for peace, celebrating ourselves. And that to me was something that was
Roy, there were no incidents at that thing either. There was no incidents. I mean, it was like about black men fighting, and there were no incidents.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. And so that's why I go to that, because, it was almost like a dream coming to fruition. I mean, I'm sure that deep inside of so many of us, we were hoping that we could come together around an issue, around dealing with peace and dealing with each other and respect for each other. And like you said, no incidents. Same thing happened when Mandela came to New York. The crime rate went down. I was in New York when Mandela came. That was another big day. There was very little crime in New York City that day. I mean, I'm serious. There was no, I can't say there was no crime. But I'm saying the impact of when we get together under a banner of peace and love, things can happen, and that's what's missing. I will say this, that's what's missing, is that we've allowed so many other currents to come into our community dealing with a lot of gray matter. And so there are some other things that I've been involved in. I'm talking about in D.C. And I know you were out there in it, you felt it. I mean, it was like you just kept moving, you kept moving. And my thing was to get it out to the world. Let's get this out to the world. And the fact that I started very much like you in newspaper business in my hometown, Natchez, Mississippi, the black newspaper, even before I got out of high school. So it's for us to be sitting here right now, and this program is, 30 minutes? We're in
40 minutes.
40 minutes.
Yeah,
we're almost going to top of the hour. And you realize that there will be people hearing this, and they've been seeing us work all of our lives. But they are hearing stories that they've never heard. Because, Sam, you're a private person, and I'm a private person.
Well, y'all, neither one of y'all are quiet.
I was gonna say, Roy, speak for yourself. I'm not too quiet. But you're not too quiet either, because you've told me some good stories. I'm telling you, And one of the things I love about Roy with these stories in Chicago, he's got photographs of Martin Luther King and Jesse Jackson leading marches in the 60s in Chicago. So it is great. Or he has pictures of people in, I think, Arkansas or Alabama somewhere where they're cutting hair on the front porch. Those are just priceless stories, priceless images that he has shot that speak to the people.
He is definitely a black cultural treasure. And so are you in a journalist space. Now, I want to say this publicly, Brother Sam Ford, is that one of the things that stood out to me with your acumen, if you will, is that you never really told the status quo line. You never would throw softballs. You always ask the tough questions, whoever it may be directed to and whatever the issue may be at the time. You ask the tough questions, and it gave me the courage and the energy and the will to do the same, because I felt that I was supposed to try to fit in terms of leading questions and when you're trying to speak to the people in positions of power. You never did that. You never paused. You never bit your tongue. You always said what needed to be said, and I always admired you for that, and I want to thank you for that. But I want to know what gave you the kahunas to do that.
Well, I don't know if kahunas is like this. I'm a journalist, and if I have a question, which I think the public would like to know the answer to, why wouldn't you ask it? I mean, I don't try to ask it in a nasty way, but I try to ask for questions in a respectful manner, but still people want to know, I mean, for example, just give you an example. I got a lot of flack because, when COVID first started, we didn't know what the hell it was, we didn't know, what it would do. And so I'll tell you, I know a number of people. A guy I knew and did a story with was in the D.C. jail. And he called me up crying because he said they weren't giving them anything. They weren't doing anything for them in that jail. Now, who was responsible for the jail? Well, the mayor is responsible for the jail ultimately, and so when you come to a news conference, you've got to ask, what are you doing to protect those people in this jail that are trapped there? They can't get out. There should be something being done for them. So who's going to speak for them if I don't? Who? That's one of those things. And I know that this guy, he's crying. If I was in jail and stuck there, and I'm calling somebody crying to help, don't you think they ought to do it? Yeah. If they can ask a question. And, of course, ultimately, the federal courts told the city they had to do something for these people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel the same way for the plight of people in Palestine right now, and which is why I'm so upset that, the mere words of ceasefire is now controversial because these people are crying for help as well. So it's because of your example and the fire in your belly that's giving me the courage to do what I'm doing and to speak out and stand up. And so I want to thank you for your example. I know Roy had something you wanted to chime in too before we wrap up here.
It's called truth. We're in search of the truth. What our community needs, and actually what the world needs, is more truth and less lies. You know, lies do a lot of damage. We are in a search for the truth. My spirit came from that black newspaper that I worked for, and I worked for Johnson in Mississippi. Then I went to Johnson in Chicago. And Johnson's motto was to do positive stories, because our community, the only kind of stories that's happening in the white press was negative. Guns,
Correct.
Negative. And so Ebony and Jet, I call Jet the first internet. You know, I mean, it was our first internet. And Ebony was CBS and Time and all that together. And so when you deal on a positive vibration, positive energy creates more positive energy and more light. Negative energy creates negativity and darkness. That's it. I don't have no more to say. My sermon is over.
We need to take the collection plate, and we want make sure we all tip our hats to Brother Roy and to Brother Sam, of course. Sam, it's been an honor to be in your presence and communication with you. I've had the opportunity to be interviewed by you a number of times. I know Roy has been several times. But let's talk about you. I mean, the fact that you got this medium to present information to the people unfiltered is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
And you're interested in a lot of things. I met Yo-Yo Ma at your place, okay? And heard him play the cello.
Really? Yo-Yo Ma.
Yes, the Jay-Z of classical music. Thank you for bringing it up. So it was a wonderful thing. Thank you. And I want to tell this story since you bring that up, because I wanted to put this on record for posterity's sake. Is that I had the pleasure of meeting Dorothy Irene Height before she passed, God bless her soul. And she was already in a wheelchair when we met. So I get down on one knee, I hold her hand, I said, Miss Height, what would you say to a young man that would give his life to complete the unfinished work of Malcolm and Martin? And she just pats my hand, she ponders this question for a second. It seems like she took maybe like 30 or 40 seconds before she responded. And she said, baby, your enemies are not even thinking about you. And at first I felt so insignificant. I'm like, oh, I'm just an ant. What can I do? Who am I? And that's not what she meant. Then she leans in for the punchline. She says, because they think they already won, so they won't see you coming. That's what she says to me. and I walked away with my chest puffed out, right? Yeah. So the day that Yo-Yo Ma's in my studio, Yo-Yo Ma's there, Esperanza Spalding, the Grammy Award winner, is there. The president of the Kennedy Center is there. Juilliard School of Music of Art is there, and somebody else. And so I'm so busy with trying to make sure that this technically pulls off without a hitch, that I'm not really taking into the fact of the people that's there. Baba Arduino, who we just lost this year, he because there's a lot of money in Anacostia, there's security. So security is at the door, like Mr. Freeman. I'm Mr. Freeman there, right? Mr. Freeman, there's someone at the door for you. And I look, and it's Baba Arduino. And they say, you want to let him in? I was like, sure, let him come in. And he comes in. I didn't invite him. I didn't ask him to bring anything. And what does he do? He comes through the door with a giant poster of Dorothy Irene Height.
Oh, okay.
And then we put that poster up front. And so when Yo-Yo Ma plays, it looks like he's serenading Dorothy Irene Height.
That's great.
You know?
That's a great
And Baba Melvin Deal did the, God bless Baba Melvin Deal, he did the libations, and he was paid to do that. And so I'm honored that I had a space that I could give a platform to those that deserve it. And so thank you for acknowledging that, and thank you for inspiring me. In fact, because of that quote right there, Sam, you just changed something right there. It's a paradigm shift. We would do a Marion Barry Summer Youth Employment Program. We call it a Media Arts Training Program for 6 weeks every summer. We did it for 8 summers until the pandemic, and we have been we haven't resumed it since the end of the pandemic. And we wanted to figure out how to expand that Media Arts Training Program to be a year-round thing. So I have a potential sponsor that's about to make a decision on this, and I'm going to go to them. If this thing gets green light, I would like to have your permission to call our Media Arts Training Program for these young people the Sam Ford Media Arts Training Program. So you ain't got to answer now, but that's what I would like to have, because you just inspired me again, and I hope that you will accept that. And Roy, we're going to have to do something for you for the photography arm of that program as well.
This is what happens when you create a space. Here we are sitting in a car, and you at your house. We sitting in a car. We've been in a car all night, and you know. But this is how it works. This is how truth. This is how real communication. This is real communication. This is not somebody directing, saying you got 2 seconds. You got to cut it off. You got to leave the room because you ain't paid for but 2 hours. And so this is what communications and love is all about. This right here is happening. These 3 people, three men, who in between their life is 100 years nearly about of me 60 years, you 50 some years of communication, of being in the communication industry. And let me tell you, this is no small matter happening right now.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly been enjoyable. I just want to say I really have enjoyed talking to you too. It's been a lot of fun. I really enjoy it.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for your years of service, your 51 years of service, and we look forward to toasting you again at your big event. Which what's the Nigerian word? Aduno?
You mean with Peggy?
For Peggy.
Oyingbo. Oyingbo is white person in Yoruba. Oyingbo.
We're gonna go turn it up for the Oyingbo party. And well, she's throwing it. She's throwing it in his honor.
Well, you know Catfish. You know Catfish Mayfield, right?
Yeah.
So Catfish is always joking and stuff. So I remember we were over at his house one time, and his friends around. He says, "Kill up all the white folks." And then except he pointed at Peggy, except her. So Peggy is an exceptional person. She is just dedicated to Ballou High School, and she has a lot of her causes, in the field of women's rights. Everybody, she wants everybody to have their rights, and that's Peggy, and she's a wonderful person.
She's a great lady.
She's definitely a great lady. She must be a descendant of John Brown. And I'm told that her last assignment was with you at the MLK celebration, and Ballou tipped the hat to her in the marching band. Is that correct?
Oh, let me tell you, this is amazing. They have the White House Photographers Association, right? Peggy was chosen, given a life as a life member of I forget the detail, but the point was they're giving her a life award for the stuff she's done all her life. It happened at the Ritz-Carlton downtown on a Saturday night, if you can imagine that she was honored. And so we told Mr. Watson, who's the director of the Blue Band, and he came. He said, we've loved Peggy for a long time, and I wanted to bring some of the kids to play for her. So 2 boys came out, and they started playing some instrument. And then Mr. Watson said, no, that's not enough. We got to have more. At that point, the drums started. 3 doors of the Ritz-Carlton ballroom opened up, and the entire Ballou marching band marched into the place. The photographers were standing on their chairs screaming. I tell you, it blew us away. Believe me, they love Peggy. It was a wonderful night.
She deserved it. She deserved it.
She deserved it, and so do you. We don't have a marching band, but we are saluting you, sir. We are saluting you.
What a great story to end that with. I mean, just think about what just happened. All these stories that I've told, we told, Horton Parks, Kansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, and then that right there. And that's smelling your roses.
Yeah, breathe deeply, Brother Sam. Brothers, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, brothers, so this has been a tribute to Brother Sam Ford, his 51 years of journalistic storytelling. Roy Lewis here co-signing, and his illustrious career of 6 decades of iconic film work as a cultural icon in our community. These are towering figures. I'm honored to be in communication with them. Please acknowledge them, study them, imitate them, emulate them, and encourage them, because they need to be acknowledged and their work needs to be also acknowledged. So I want to thank you both for all the years of work and inspiration you have provided. This has been WEAC Radio, Radical Side, Martin Luther King Avenue. We are looking forward to many more conversations with people of your caliber. But Sam, let me say this, please consider, because we would love to put your name on the Media Arts Training Program at WEAC Radio, and we can talk later about the details, all right?
Okay, and I enjoyed this evening.
Take care of yourself, bro.
Okay, Roy, you too. We'll be in touch.
Stay strong.
Stay safe, stay strong, stay woke, and cease fire. WEAC Radio, do something.